In this lesson, I want to introduce some of the more usable nodes in Substance Designer. I hope the videos in my YouTube channel were useful for you guys, and I hope you enjoy them. And if you are, I hope you introduce my channel to your friends, because the more subscribers I have and the more views I have in my videos, the more motivated I am to create other tutorials and other software courses and share it with you. For this lesson, during introducing the nodes, I will do some practice and I will show you the nodes during the practice to you. So let's start our work, and for starting I will go to the file and add a new substance, and I will select the physically based for my physically based metallic roughness for my template and change the name to something like, for example, lesson 03. And click on OK. Now I have my graph here, and in previous lesson I showed you how to create a red shiny metallic material in Substance Designer, and I want to do that one more time. For doing that, I told you how to create a uniform color and add to your work area. For doing that, I told you to use a uniform color node by clicking on the CLR button here, or by pressing the spacebar keyboard to open the atomic node list and selecting the uniform color here. Okay, uniform color is one of the useful nodes in Substance Designer, and as you see in the specific parameters, we have two options. One is color mode that consists of color and grayscales, and the other is output color that has a palette for changing the colors. When you select the color mode to color, you can select any of this color you want, and when you select the grayscale mode, you can just select the colors between the black and white ranges. And keep in mind, using the grayscale instead of color is more optimized during creating your materials. And the more optimized work you have, the higher speed you have during the process of your materials in the destination software. For example, if you want to introduce Studio Max, if you want to use it in Unreal Engine and other things, you have the more speed for processing your materials. And grayscale is more optimized, and if you don't need color for your node and for your areas of nodes, I suggest you to use grayscale instead of color. And keep in mind that knowing which of the mode you are working is very important, because you can only link a color node to a color node, or a grayscale node to a grayscale node. You cannot link a color node to a grayscale node. And some node that I will introduce you in this lesson, some of them in this lesson, only supports, for example, grayscale nodes, and some only supports color nodes. And you must know which mode you are working with. For example, in this time, because I want a red color for doing the previous tutorial, I want a mode of color. So I select the color mode, and I will change the color in the palette to red, and I will link it to base color. Alright, now I have a red color in my material, and I want two color nodes, one for roughness and the other for metallic, because I want my reflection to be a little bit blurry. I will change the roughness to something like dark gray, and in other words, I made my material a little bit rough. And because I want a metal material, I want to change, and I must change the metallic color to white, so that I have a fully metal material. So, as I mentioned before, when I have roughness and metallic output, but I haven't a normal output, I will have some errors in some parts of the model. For example, in this model, I have some errors in the corners. And for solving that, I must give something to a normal, even if it is a uniform color for normal. So for adding a uniform color to a normal, I will introduce another atomic node called normal color. Normal color will add a uniform color to a normal depending on the directions and the slope angle you have in instance parameters. For example, if you have the usual normal color here, and if you change the slope angle as you see, the color will change. So I leave everything on default, and let's link this normal color to normal. So normal color was another node I introduced to you. Alright. Now I have the red metallic material created, but now this time I don't want a uniform red color for my base color in this material. For example, I want a combination of the red and green material for my base color. For combining two nodes together, we must use a node called blend. And I think blend is one of the most important node in Substance Designer that you will use too much in future. So for adding two nodes, we want a blend. For adding a blend, you must click on the BLD button here, or a space bar on the keyboard, and select the blend atomic node. As you see in the blend, I have a foreground input, I have a background input, and I have an opacity input. I want, let's delete this link. I want a red color for the foreground, and I want to copy this color by Ctrl C and Ctrl V, and change this color to something like, for example, something like green. I have a green color and I have a red color. For example, I want the green color to be my foreground color, and I want the red color to be my background color. And if I double click on the blend to see the result in the 2D view, as you see, I have just the color of the foreground, and they are not combined together. For combining them together, I double click on the blend to have the or just one click. You can, by one click on each node, you will have the parameters in the right side of your screen. In the specific parameters, you can change them, or by double clicking you can see them in 2D view. So one click is enough to see the parameters of a node. Okay, I want to change the combination of these two nodes in blend mode. One of the changing the combination is opacity. Opacity 1 tells me I just need the effect of the first and the foreground node. For example, as you see, when the opacity is 1, I see just the effect of the foreground node, that is green. And if I move the opacity towards 0, I say I want just the effect of the background node, which is red here. And if I set it on something like 0.5, I have the effect, half of the effect of the foreground and half of the effect of the background here. Another way of combining these two nodes together is using some mathematical operations, like multiplying the pixels together, or adding the foreground and background pixels data with each other. For doing that, we use the blend mode options. For doing that, if I, for example, add the pixels of green with the pixels of the red, I must have something like yellow for the result of adding these two nodes together. Let's do that. For example, if I go to the blending mode and change the blending mode to add, I have the yellow color that is the result of adding these two nodes together. Alright. Another form of blending mode is to use an grayscale map as opacity input. Keep in mind, for the opacity input of a blend map, you must use a grayscale node. And for doing that, I will go, for example, to my library, to generators, and let's clicked on B and W spots tree here, and I will link it to the opacity. And as you see, the foreground and background are combined together by the B and W spot tree map as the alpha and opacity of the blends. Alright, and if I change the instance parameters of my B and W spots, you see the effect on the blends. Alright, now I can link it to the base color and see the result here. So blend was another node I introduced to you, and let's introduce other nodes in this lesson. So I will delete these nodes and do another practice. For doing another practice, again, I want two colors. Let me just start my work with one uniform color, and I want something like brown material for that. And let's copy by Ctrl C and Ctrl V this uniform color and change this to less saturated colors. Yes, I want to combine them together, so I will use a blend. And one note I want to say you when I want to use these nodes is, let me delete that. When I select a node, or when I don't select a node, or when I don't select a link here, and just clicked on an empty space in the graph editor and then clicked on a node, for example blend, I will have a blend with no link on it. As you see, this blend has no link. But if I select, for example, this link here and add a blend node, I will have a blend linked to the uniform color and base color. In other words, I have a blend between the uniform color and the base color in this link. For example, let me show you. If I add a blend, I have a blend in between that is linked to uniform color and the base color output. And let me delete that. If I select a node and then add another node, for example, I will add the blend again. The new node is connected to selected node, as you see. Alright, this was the point I wanted to say. Let's continue our work. I will add a blend here, and I link it to foreground and link it to background. And for the opacity map, I use the B and W spots here and add it to the opacity. As you see, I have something like here. And I want to combine these colors with another color. I said blend combines two nodes together. But if you want to combine more than two nodes together, we must use nested blends. In other words, if I want to combine these two colors with another color, I must use another blend. So I will click on this blend and create another blend here. I don't want this blend to be background, so I will delete this link and add it to the foreground. And for the background, I want another uniform color. For this place, I want a dark gray color for the background. And for the combination of these two ones, I want another custom node in the generators. I want, for example, brick. This brick 2 is good. And as you see, the brick has white and black areas. White areas will be used for foreground node, and dark areas will be used for background node. So let's link this custom node to opacity, and I have a brick base color, as you see. So I will link this result to the base color, and as you see, I have a brick base color on my shape. But the brick is more shiny, and I want to change the roughness of that. But for changing the roughness, I don't want to add it just a uniform color, because I think the roughness is not the same in all parts of the brick. For example, I want the dark areas in this map, these dark areas between the bricks in this map be more rough, and the bricks be less rough. I want the rougher part of the brick be in these dark areas. So for doing that, I want to add something to the roughness. And for adding that, I need to change this color result to a grayscale map and link the grayscale map to the roughness. For changing this color mode to grayscale mode, we use another node called Grayscale Conversion, and this is the other node I want to introduce. Grayscale Conversion, as you see, is another atomic node that converts. Oh, excuse me, I don't want to convert the color. Let's create an empty space in Graph Editor and create Grayscale Conversion. Grayscale Conversion converts a color node into a grayscale node. It has an input. The input of the Grayscale Conversion must be a color node, and the output will be a grayscale node. So for the input, I will add this color node, and as you see, I have a grayscale result for the output of the Grayscale Conversion, and this was the other node I introduced to you. But as you see, the dark areas, the areas between the brick, has the darker color than the other parts, and when I add it to the roughness, it means these parts are more shiny than the brick ones. But I want these parts to be more rough. So I must invert the colors. I want invert the colors, and for inverting the colors, we must use another node called Invert Greyscale. So let's select this node and click on the space bar and type in the search invert. And I have two options. One invert is for inverting color nodes, and the other is for inverting grayscale nodes. And because my node is a grayscale one, I must select invert grayscale. And as you see, my node is inverted. All right. Now I have between the bricks are very rough in this map, and the other parts are less rough, but because they are towards white, I want these parts of the brick be more darker in the roughness. So I need to change the level of this node, the amount of dark areas in this node, and for doing that, I must use another node called levels. So let's select this node and add a levels node. And levels node is one of the useful nodes I wanted to introduce you. Levels node controls the level of your map, and you can change the histogram to lower or increase the areas of bright or dark parts, or move the middle gray parts towards white or black. Or even you can change the brightness of your node. Here you have a histogram in your specific parameters that you can control the level of your work. For example, if I move it, I will have more black areas. If I move this middle point here, I will move the gray value towards the darker ones, and I can control the brightness by these parameters in the histograms, as you see. All right, I think it's enough, and it's okay for my roughness, and I will give it to the roughness. Let's give it to the roughness now. As you see, I have something like that. And by changing the levels, you can see the effect of roughness on your work. Alright. The other thing I want to add to my material is to add some bump or porosity to the work. For adding some to the work, I need a normal map, and I can use my grayscale node here. For example, this node, as you see, to convert it to a normal map. For doing that, I must use another node, and I want to introduce you another node called normal. And you can find it by the name NRM button here, or you can click on the space bar and select the normal node, and normal will convert a grayscale map into a normal map. Keep in mind the input of the normal map is a grayscale map, so this is a grayscale map, so I link this to the normal, and as you see, I have a normal map in my result. And if I give the output, which is a color result, to the normal map, I will have some porosity and some bump on the break, and I can change and increase my normal map by clicking on the normal, and in a specific parameter change the intensity of the normal, and as you see the effect here, yes, I think it's enough. One of the options in the specific parameters in normal map is the normal formats. As you see, there are two formats for normal map. One is OpenGL and the other is DirectX. The only difference with OpenGL and DirectX is the direction of Z-axis. And you must keep in mind which one of this format you must use, and which of this format your destination software will support. For example, I want to use my material in 3D Studio Max, and 3D Studio Max supports DirectX, so I must choose DirectX for my normal format, and you must see what type of normal format your software will support. Alright, now the normal map is created. Alright, because I don't have a metallic effect for my brick material, I give a uniform black color to my metallic, as you see here. And because I don't want to create a complete tutorial, I will leave it as it is, and I want to introduce you another node that is a very main node, and for introducing that I will delete these two colors and even this blend node here, and let's add a gradient map to the work. For adding a gradient map, you can click on the GRA button here, or clicking on pressing a spacebar and selecting gradient map. Gradient map is one of the useful and one of the important nodes in Substance Designer that have an input that will support only grayscale nodes. And when you give it a grayscale node, you can change the gradient color of that. For example, let me show you. I have created this gradient, and for the input I use this BNW spot grayscale node, and I link it to the input, and I have the result in my gradient, and I can change the gradient color here by the in a specific parameters by the gradient option here. When I click on that, I have a color for the dark areas. For example, for these dark areas, I want a dark brown color, so I will click on that and click on the dark area to select this and change its color to something like dark brown. And as you see, the color of dark areas changes to brown. And for the white areas, I want something like lighter brown, so let's change it to a lighter brown, as you see. And we have a gradient from the dark brown to lighter brown here. And this is what a gradient node does. But you can add other colors between these two gradients. For adding colors, you can click here, for example, and change another color to that. And we have another color here. We can change the position of this color, and as you see, and even you can delete this one by holding and moving it up. All right. But one of the most important and powerful features in gradient map is the option pick gradient. Here you can access this option by clicking on gradient editor here and clicking on the pick gradient. You can pick the gradients of a picture and use it in your node. Let me show you an example, and let me open a picture of a brick like that. And let me minimize my window, and let's click on the pick gradients. Now I can pick the gradients of the places of this picture. For example, I want to pick gradient from this side to this side. So I will click on here and drag, and I will have the gradient from this picture, from this side to this side here. As you see, we have something like that. And this is one of the most powerful features in gradient map in Substance Designer. All right, it's awesome. And now I can change my output to the blend. One of the other options in gradient map is the color mode. As you see, we have two kinds of color and grayscale modes. And now by default, I have the color mode. And if I change it to grayscale, I will have the colors in the range of black and white. So I want a color node for this, and let's give it to the blend. And I will have something like that. And all right, it was the function and performance of gradient map, a node that I introduced to you. And there are two more nodes that I want to introduce before finishing this lesson. One is Histogram Range, which is a custom node, and the other is Histogram Scan, which it's custom node again. And these nodes are a good alternative for levels. For example, if I let me show you. If I clicked on the BNW spot, and if I click on an empty space of my graph editor, and clicked on a space as search histogram scan. If I clicked on a histogram scan and link this BNW spot to the input of histogram scan. Input of histogram scan is must be grayscale color, as you see. So I will link it to that, and as you see, I have a black result here. And if I change the position here, I will move the black areas towards white areas. That is something like the operation of levels, and we can control the contrast here. So the histogram scan is a good alternative for the levels to control the position of white and dark areas. But why we use histogram scan instead of levels? Because as you see, let me show you a level nodes here. If I found that here, as you see, level nodes has a histogram for controlling the dark and white areas, for controlling the position and the range of the work. In future, I will show you how to expose parameters to use them in other softwares. And in exposing, you cannot use histograms for exposing process. For using for that That's why we use histogram scan instead of levels to expose the parameters easily for controlling them in other softwares. And this is what histogram scan does. And we have another option, histogram range here. As you see, histogram range. And in input we must give it a grayscale node, and I will add it to the input of that. And you can control the range and the position of your work. For example, by controlling the range, I can decrease somehow the contrast of my work, as you see, and move them towards a uniform color, as you see. Or I can change the contrast of that, as you see, and I can change the position of that to lighter or darker colors. And this is what the brightness part of a level does. And it will be a good alternative for the brightness part and controlling the range part of the levels when I want to expose some parameters for using them in other softwares. And in next lessons I will show you how to expose parameters and use them in other programs. But I think it's enough for this lesson, and I hope the points and this lesson was useful for you. And in the next lesson I want to speak a little about the size modes in Substance Designer. As you saw, I had two kinds of size in new when I clicked on new substance. In new substance window I have two kinds of size. One was relative to parent and the other was the absolute. And I will show you another form that is relative to input in the next lesson, and I will say the difference between them and how to use them for having a more optimized and better material. So I hope the lesson was useful for you, and have a good time. Good luck.